A very warm welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Today is a bright morning, and I have with me a very, very special guest. He has been the discoverer of the emotion code and the body code, and recently, an addition to his feather has been the belief code. Earlier, he has been a chiropractic practitioner. I have personally benefited from a lot of his teachings, which are mentioned in his books. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Bradley Nelson. Welcome, Doctor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's great to be here, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
So let me start by how I was introduced to your works here in New Delhi. So in the COVID days, I was taking a course on online course on Reiki, and this is a modality which I used to practice for many years. And there were kind of about participants from 15 countries participating in that particular course, and it was highly relevant back at that time because there was a lot of anxiety amongst people about in 2021. And after it was over, one of the ladies, her name is Almas Mauji, and I have her permission to take her name here. And she messaged me and she said, she calls me professor. So she said, Professor Saab, if you don't mind, I would like to introduce you to a particular healing modality. And I said, yes, why would I mind? I am absolutely open. If you are telling me something, it is like you are giving me something. So why wouldn't I be open? So she said, okay, this is the thing. I said, okay, does it work? So she said, yes, it works. If you would like to have an sample session, I would love to. I said, yes, why not? So then I and she connected over the internet. And then she performed something, which I will, of course, you do it or you have been doing it all your life. But it was the first session for me. It was kind of an emotion code. And then I felt lighter over here. Suddenly something ticked. I said, yeah, this works. So then I started my journey. I read the emotion code. I read more about the articles which you have mentioned on your website. And from there on, there was no looking back. So I'm personally very grateful. And I was very amazed at this particular wonderful healing modality. One of the
That's a
things
great.
which, yeah, please.
Oh, it's great to hear.
Yeah, and one of the things which differentiated it from Reiki and other practices, because healing modalities, which I have found, are of two types. One in where we are not very specific about what's wrong, and the other in which we are very specific about what exactly lies under the surface. So in Reiki or in pranic healing, we are never very bothered about what exactly is wrong. But in emotion code, in body code, we try to find out what exactly specifically is wrong. And it
Mhm.
changed my system of working and it helped a lot. How? The question is how. But I can come to that, but I would like to, bring in your thoughts about it. And then later I'll talk to you about how this helps in, finally communicating with our clients.
Okay, absolutely. Well, it's been a really interesting journey for me. My healing journey really began when I was 7 years old. I was really sick with the measles,
I see.
and I had overheard my parents talking
Mhm.
that the next day they were going to admit me to the hospital and put me into something called an oxygen tent. And I didn't really know what an oxygen tent was, but um, but so I was very sick that night. I remember my parents had made a bed on the couch so that I could be near their bedroom, and I remember lying in this couch bed, feeling very sick, feverish, nauseated, and my parents came into the room, and it was kind of late at night. Everyone else had gone to bed, but I was still awake. And my mother said to my father, she said, honey, will you kneel down with me and say a prayer for our boy so he'll be able to get well? And so they did. They knelt down by the side of the couch. My father starts praying out loud for me. Now, I think this was probably the first time I'd ever heard my father pray. He wasn't a preacher or anything like that. He was in real estate and construction and, but in the middle of his prayer, this amazing change started at the top of my head and it went to the soles of my feet. And
That's
in
good.
that amount of time, within the space of about a single second, I was
Mm.
completely healed. And and I was so excited. But I waited till I waited until my dad was done praying,
Yeah.
um, before I said anything. And then, and then I said, I'm better, I'm better. And they said, that's fine, go back to sleep. Tomorrow you're going in the oxygen tent. And so that was really the beginning for me. And to go from being really sick one moment to being totally healthy in the next instant is just so bizarre and unbelievable and kind of, you know, so unusual
Mm.
that that event is really burned into every particle of my being. I remember it like it happened yesterday, and it was, of course, many years ago now. And so that was the beginning really for me. And then I had some other really amazing, powerful experiences, spiritual experiences. And eventually those experiences brought me to chiropractic school. So I went to chiropractic school, became a chiropractor. When I got into practice, I figured, okay, God's gotten me into this. Maybe God will help me. And we all believe different things, and and that's fine. But I believe that God is our Father, and that literally the Father of our spirits, and that He loves us and wants the best for us. And so what I would do is, when a patient would come in, um, I got in a habit of every time I saw a patient, so multiple times every day, I would just pause for a moment and just ask silently for the higher power, God, source, energy, whatever you want to call it, to help me. And it was just a totally private, totally personal habit. Nobody ever knew that I was, saying a prayer for them, but I was. And there were times, Professor, where information would just suddenly flood in to me. I'd get these downloads. That didn't happen very often,
Mm.
but it did happen once in a while. So I learned that higher power is very aware of us. And so one of the things that I learned as time went on was that my patients all had something in common. No matter how young or old they were, no matter what they were suffering from, they all had emotional baggage that was creating symptoms for them. And what I learned is that emotional baggage is really the energy of those emotional experiences that people had gone through, and that had not really been processed well. And so, but I found that it was causing all kinds of interesting symptoms. I mean, physical pain. Uh,
Right.
90% of all the physical pain that people have is due to emotional baggage, to these emotional energies. But things like depression and anxiety and phobias and panic attacks and post-traumatic stress,
Right.
eating disorders, self-sabotage, every disease process that human beings have has an emotional component. And so that's why it became clear to me that I had to leave my practice and the world needed to know about this. So I needed to write a book. And so that's the Emotion Code book. And it came out in 2007. And you can see behind me on the wall, these are all, the Emotion Code and Body Code books from different countries and so on. My publisher
Wow.
sends me books, and I never know what to do with them. So I just frame them and put them on the wall.
That's really very nice. It looks very incredible. The only thing is you have blurred the background, so we are not able to see it as clearly as probably you have wanted us to see. But then, yes, I think one of the things which you have mentioned in the book, I think the emotion code is about the ill health of your wife, Miss Lana, and how probably, then you figured out a way of healing her through your practices. So you must be a man of strong convictions and strong values. This is what I was thinking, because only a very strong soul or a good willpower or a good spirit can keep fighting on with that kind of a optimism that I have to find something new out of the ordeal which I am facing currently. And second thing was that in every of your healings or the example healings which you have uh, on YouTube, there is a prayer component. And today I got to know from where this prayer component has come. Because back in India,
Huh?
we always start everything with a prayer. So it was highly unusual for me to
Beautiful.
see a person from California background starting his kind of healing or his kind of modality with a prayer, and every time. So that was something which excited me, and it was something which gelled immediately. So
Oh, that's beautiful. I didn't know that. I didn't know that that's also a tradition that you have.
even if
In
we write any books, if you see traditional Indian books, on the first page, we bow down to a deity, telling the deity to bless us with more downloads, with more creativity, and to help people around the world get benefit from that particular book. So it is a very, very common and a very, very ancient practice.
Yeah, yeah, I believe it is. Well, it's an interesting thing. I learned. I mean, the beginning of that was really when I was 7, and I was healed instantly because
Instantly, yes.
at 7 years old, I learned. Okay, well, there's apparently a higher power. My father was asking for help from God
Mm.
to heal me, and it worked. So apparently there is a higher power that we can draw upon. And I
Yes.
absolutely know now that there is, and that we have a father. I refer to God as our Father in heaven. That He is I believe He is literally our Father, the Father of our spirits. And
So
you
then there
know,
is something to ponder over. Probably your next book would be the Father Code, in which you don't have to be, specifying what is wrong. Just ask the Father and you get it done. And yes, it is possible, but then I'm just saying, it just gave me an idea. Probably the next book can be that.
well, it's interesting because the next book that's coming out this fall is going to be called The Heart Code.
Oh, I
And
see.
it's
Mhm.
really it's about the heart wall. We felt like the heart wall was so important that it needed a separate book.
Mhm.
Um, and so that's coming out in December in the US. But but yeah, it's a fascinating thing. I've received a lot of answers to prayer, for example. In
Mhm.
fact, here's an experience that I had that I
Yes.
think you and your listeners and viewers will enjoy.
Yes.
Um, so I have this habit. I'm back in my practice. I'm seeing people every day in, day out, and I have this little routine. I have a table that stands up vertically, and a person will stand against the table, put their nose in the slot in the middle, and grab onto the handholds on the sides, and then I press a button, and the table will lay down horizontally, and there's a foot plate at the end of the table that then drops away so that I can look at their leg length to see how long, how balanced their legs are. And that was a method that I was using at the time. So one
And
day,
and 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 and, and I have to stop. You said something very interesting. And if it is not balanced, then if one leg is a little shorter, then what does it signify? For
what
my
I would
people,
do, yeah,
I'm
what,
personally curious about it, because one
sure,
of my patient was suffering from this, and she had about 500 level of sugar, which was quite high. And every day, her 21-year-old beautiful, beautiful girl, every day bleeding in college. And when I saw the legs, they were out of proportion. One leg is shorter. What does it signify to you?
right. Well, what I learned was a method of chiropractic adjusting, or in other words, realigning the bones in the body. And this table was a table that I got from this particular school of thought.
Yeah,
And so what I found was, and I'll just share with you an interesting story and kind of
please.
how some of this came about. Well, so what I would do, and in this method, what I learned was that if I had a person laying down flat on the table, and let's say that their legs are relatively balanced, I
Okay.
found that, and I learned from this method that I could press on a certain bone, and if the legs stayed balanced, I'd press on another bone, and maybe I would get a change in leg length. And that meant that that bone was out of alignment, and the body was reacting to me pressing on that bone. And
Wow. That's a
yeah,
wonderful insight.
yeah. So if the bone was misaligned, let's say in this direction, if I pushed it in this direction, the leg length would balance. If I pushed it in this direction and made it worse, the leg length would shorten. And so what I would do is use this method to realign the bones, and I would get a person totally balanced so that by the time their treatment was done, their leg length would be the same, right? And that was the goal with every treatment. And this was many years ago now, but one day something very interesting happened. I had a patient that came in, and it was just a man that I was working on, and I'd done a session. I'd been working on him for a while, gotten everything lined up. All the bones were aligned. His legs were perfectly balanced, right? And then for some reason, I started thinking about his left kidney. And I
Oh,
don't know why, but I started thinking about his left kidney, and I checked his legs, and all of a sudden they were way off. And I thought, wait a minute, I what? I just balanced him. And I thought about his right kidney, checked his legs, and they were perfectly aligned. And I thought, no way. And I thought about his left kidney, boom, big difference. Thought about his right kidney, perfectly balanced, right? And so, so what I found was that the and I wasn't saying anything out loud at all. So what I learned was that his subconscious mind was able to detect what I was thinking about consciously, and it was responding to my conscious thoughts. So then what I learned was, and that began this process where I would talk to the body. A patient would come in, I check their leg length, and then I would ask for a yes answer, and I would get a balanced leg, or a no answer, and I would get an imbalanced leg. So in other words, I could get the body to respond, basically saying yes or no. Now, let me stop here. I was a computer programmer in the early 1980s. I took a class at college on computer programming. It was the only class that I ever took.
I
But
think back then there were languages like Basic and Fortran,
yeah, basic, Fortran. Yeah, exactly.
Pascal,
And
something
yeah,
like
I
that.
learned a language called DBase. It was a relational data.
Database.
You remember that one?
Yeah.
And yeah, not too many of us remember that, but I'm glad that you do. And anyway, I learned that language, and then I actually did that for a business. I would program people's computers back in the early days when the IBM PC first came out. There was no software, so I would go into businesses and write their software. And one day in my neurology class in chiropractic school, my instructor, I remember, was talking about how the brain is a computer. And I remember sitting there thinking, wow, the brain's a computer. That makes sense. I wonder if we'll ever have the technology to be able to hack into the brain and ask questions, because the brain would know what's really going on with somebody. It would know the information must be in there somewhere about what's wrong with the person if they're sick or whatever. And I thought, well, maybe in 200 years or maybe 300, we'll have that technology. Little did I know that that's exactly what I was going to be spending my life on. So I have this routine, right? A patient comes in, they stand on this table, I press the button, the table goes horizontal. And so on one particular day, just a regular day like any other, a patient comes in, stands on the table lays face down. And as that's going on, I'm offering this prayer. And my prayer was, and this is a silent prayer, right? But essentially what I would say is, Father in heaven, um, thanks for this opportunity to work on this person. Please help me to figure out what is really wrong with them so that I can help them, right? In the name of Jesus Christ, amen. Because as a Christian, I pray in the name of Jesus Christ.
Right.
And that was it. And it was just a momentary pause, really. But on this particular occasion, after saying this prayer, I turned my attention to this person that's lying on the table in front of me. And all of a sudden, it's like my eyes for the first time are suddenly opened and I can see. And I understand that, and I comprehend that I'm standing in the presence of a sacred temple, the temple of the body, right? Now, I had heard that phrase before, the body is a temple and so on, and I thought it was probably true, but I never really understood it until that moment. And it just instantly filled with the deepest sense of reverence and awe. And this experience, it only lasted for a few seconds, but it was like a little window opened into the actual reality of our world. And I was able to peek beneath the curtain, for a moment about what these bodies of ours really are. So that completely changed my view and my perception. So, I began to think of myself as a temple repair person, right?
I
People
see. Great.
people
Great.
would bring a temple in and I would try to fix it.
So spirituality has essentially been a part of your early life, from your early life, and it is somehow, therefore, very evident in every session which you recommend how to take a particular session of the emotion code or the body code. And earlier I was talking to you about healing modalities where specificity is there and modalities where we don't have to be specific. We just have to pray to the Almighty to get the things okay, or give it a vital force called pranic force, and the things will get okay. Now, when I started doing the emotion code and the body code, now, from whatever I could gather from the books and the articles from your website,
Mhm.
the good thing which happened was that the client would get information as to exactly what was wrong with him or her. So if we are doing healing for a child of say about 15 years, and the mother is very anxious as to what is wrong with the child, at least she should get some kind of a report, which was possible in the emotion code because we specified what kind of emotions were troubling the child. So
Right.
if it is abandonment, if it is jealousy, what
Mhm.
kind? So then you get to know about the mental makeup of the person or what he or she probably is going through. So that made a lot of difference. Now,
Yeah.
the first, I think after you came out with the emotion code and the body code, then from what I could gather from your website was that you tried figuring out how this can improve relationships apart from the emotional healing. And this is what I tried at one of my patients from Adelaide in Australia. So they moved
Mhm.
from India to Australia. And I'm bringing this subject up because then I want you to discuss a few of your cases in case you have applied them outside of the illnesses of the body. Because this was a kind of a behavioral problem, which I'll now discuss. So this lady calls me from Adelaide and she says that there is a problem. My husband was, having an extramarital affair with my best friend, and now they are no more together. So he's very disheartened because he
Yeah.
really started loving that particular friend of mine. And now he's not going to the office, he's not going to work, and he's drinking, drinking, and drinking. And now he's carrying a knife in his hand, and he says that I'll kill myself. Now, what
Oh
can I
boy.
do? Can you please help me out? Now, I was here in New Delhi. She was there in Adelaide. I don't know what exactly the problem is because I've heard only one side of the story. And unless you hear various perspectives, you don't know what actually has happened. So I said, okay, I'm not sure. But since I was very enthusiastically reading your stuff, I said, okay, let me try. So what I did was I tried to do a healing whereby I tried to specify what things came up, like, for example, the emotional healing, because I said there should be an emotional component to whatever is happening. So I applied the emotion code. I went on to some mental beliefs, which we do as a psychologist. I am conversant with the belief systems. And so I used that particular frame of reference, which you've mentioned in the emotion code, found out some of the belief systems or the mental thought patterns which were bothering him. And I just tried to release them. And then I wrote it down on a piece of paper and I clicked a photograph and sent it across to her. And to my amazement, she said, the next day that I have come to office because now he is a lot better. At least he's not threatening me with a suicide. That
Good.
was my first experience of utilizing what you have taught to something outside the realm of health.
Yeah.
This,
Sure.
this was very pretty exciting because then I thought that these things can be applied anywhere. And then I
That's
started
absolutely.
doing something called reality shifts, but I'll come to that. So, what are your thoughts on it, and have you applied? And please give us some kind of an interesting case on relationship healing so that our people or people who are listening to you, not only viewers from India, but viewers from around the world, your fans, they will know about it, and it will open a window of, a hope that these things are also possible by using the emotion code or the body code.
Well, absolutely. I mean, let's see. There are so many stories, so
Yes.
very many
Yes.
stories about this kind of thing. Um, people. I mean, I've personally seen people who were suicidally depressed, like that guy. Uh,
Yes.
I've seen I've seen them get well just in a day or two by just releasing that emotional baggage. Now, and the to help people understand, I think how this works would probably be helpful.
Please.
Um, think about it this way, okay? We've all experienced emotions. We experience emotions every day, right? Now, when you experience an emotion, you experience that emotion in response to some kind of stimulus. Maybe you see something, maybe someone says something to you, you hear something, maybe you read something. Something happens, and you start to feel a certain emotion. Well, what's happening then is that you're moving into what I call the emotional loop. Okay, the emotional loop is the actual emotional experience, and when you start to feel that particular emotion, what you're really feeling on a quantum level is a frequency, a vibration. Nikola Tesla said, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency,
Energy.
vibration, right? It's all energy. In fact, Einstein said the medicine of the future will be the medicine of frequencies. And so,
He
anyway,
also said imagination is more important than thinking.
exactly right. And so when you start to feel an emotion, you're feeling a specific vibrational frequency. Every emotion has a different frequency. And so you might start to think the thoughts that go along with that emotion. You might start to even feel some physical sensations. Most of the time, what happens is as we start to feel those feelings, we acknowledge those feelings and we allow that emotional energy to dissipate, and the loop closes on that experience. And now that experience is finished and is completed. And now you're ready to feel the next emotion. But sometimes we interrupt that loop. Sometimes an emotion is coming up for us that we don't want to feel. And so we will stop that. We don't want to go there. We don't want to feel resentful. We don't want to feel anger or grief or whatever it is. So we bury it. And
Right.
that results in an emotional loop now that is open. Instead of being closed, it's like it's stuck, it's open. And so the energy of that emotion is still there, kind of suspended in the body. Sometimes an emotion is just overwhelming. Something terrible happens suddenly, and many of us, most of us, have had something like that happen, and so that kind of emotional energy can be trapped in the body because that emotion just was too hard to process, and so that creates an open loop. Sometimes an emotion comes up for us, and we make a conscious decision to really empower that emotion and make it really big, way bigger than it should be. The phrase, making a mountain out of a
Mhm.
molehill comes to mind. And we do that sometimes. That also will result in an open loop. So when we have an open loop like that, we have a trapped emotion. The energy of that emotional experience now is trapped in the body. And so what happens is when we have emotional energy like this, what it does is it blocks our ability to it interferes with our ability to move forward in our lives because now we are carrying that emotional baggage. You can think about everybody that you know as dragging suitcases behind them full of rocks, in a sense.
Excellent.
And the
Excellent
rocks are their
analogy.
emotional baggage, right? Yeah. And as we cut loose from that emotional baggage with the emotion code, as we start releasing those emotions, people feel lighter. They feel like, they're actually physically lighter a lot of the time. And what eventually happens is people say many times that they feel like they're turning back into the person that they used to be or that they were intended to be. And I mean, think how powerful that is. It's really an amazing thing.
Yes.
So so yes, I mean there are so many stories.
No doubt
You
about it. If we say it would not be wrong that you are a deliverer of happiness, because the emotion code lightens you, and what you get after being light is happiness.
yeah,
So
it's really
it
true.
can also be, it could have also be termed as the happiness code. How? Because if you become lighter, if you delete the negative emotions, what you initially experience is happiness.
Yeah, that's true. I
So you
think
are
that
the
what
happiness doctor, Dr. Nelson.
I kind of like that. I'll tell my wife that. See what she says. Um, but you know, we're I believe that we're designed to vibrate on high levels, you know.
Hmm.
But what happens is the emotional baggage tends to it's like anchors on a ship. It tends to drag us down. I mean, think about a hot air balloon. You know, a hot air balloon will have a gondola, right, a basket, and they'll have all these sandbags and the sandbags keep it anchored to the earth along with ropes. But if you cut loose those ropes and you throw some of those sandbags out, well, you start rocketing up into the sky, right? And um, and so that's really what this is about. And the beauty of it is that it's so simple. You know, one of my
No, no, that is something which I wanted to bring up. The most
yeah,
incredible aspect of the emotion code and the body code is that you have kept it simple. And as the proverb, or this goes like less is more. So
yes.
it is such a simple technique, but then it is so powerful that it is life-changing. It is giving so much of hope, peace, and happiness to people all around the world. And that is why it was my earnest desire to be speaking to you regarding this, because I really benefited. Now,
Well, that's so
um,
great. So I'm thrilled.
I want a couple of things from you, Dr. Nelson, for our viewers and for the people who are practicing in various parts of the world.
Mhm.
The two things which I wanted to ask. One,
Okay.
please share somehow some of the diseases, some of the problems where you have found in your experience, your practice, that yes, this was easily solvable through applying the emotion code or the body code. I'm not saying that we are not proclaiming that we are treating, we are not going into that legal
Right.
battle, but we are just sharing our experience that you did it, and then yes, you could find a difference in these particular diseases, that this is working really very well. So that people who are utilizing that, they have this frame of mind that yes, if somebody is suffering from this particular problem, at least they can try the emotion code or the body code, because this is some information which I did not found very easily in whatever you have written till now. So I thought
Oh,
perhaps the
right.
conversation would be a good place to ask you about some of these aspects, please.
Well, yes, absolutely. Let's see here. Hang on just a minute. I've got I've got a list here.
Please.
Okay. Hang on just a second. If I can get my computer to cooperate. Oh, let's see.
Till the time you bring it up. You were mentioning, when you mentioned about the emotional baggage, about anxiety, about depression, um,
yeah.
I wanted to add psoriasis to the list. I have solved a few cases of psoriasis, and I have found that a lot of emotional baggage was there in cases with psoriasis. Even on my YouTube channel, there are testimonials, feedbacks from doctors. Uh, there are two testimonials where they have mentioned how I have been able to solve psoriasis. And part
Hmm.
of that solution, and very important aspect, was the emotional healing, which we did using the emotion code.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's so interesting because what I found was that every single disease process that I saw, and I'll read the short
Please,
list here.
please, please.
Uh, every single one of these had emotional baggage as a component, sometimes as the single biggest component of the disease. Okay, so here we go. Um, ADD,
Mm-hmm.
ADHD,
Yeah.
uh, addiction, driven by trapped emotions,
Right.
uh, aggressiveness, aggression, allergies, anger, anxiety, asthma, uh, autism often can be helped by relieving emotional energies. There are other things with autism that you can do too. Uh,
What would those be? Just a few pointers?
yeah, well, typically with autism, Uh, in most of the cases that I've seen, there was vaccination that had happened, and so a lot of toxins in the vaccines. And I think that in the world that we live in now, all women, because the world is so toxic, all women are carrying a certain toxic load. Then they have a child, and the load tends to pass to them and even maybe get concentrated. And then that child gets some injection of a vaccine, um, toxic food, and so on. And then it just pushes them over the edge, I think. Um,
Okay.
a lot of vaccines historically have had mercury in them, and mercury has a very high affinity for nervous system tissue. And there's no blood-brain barrier for these infants and these babies. So yeah, it's a whole nother show we could do.
Right. Yes.
You know,
Yes.
but autoimmune issues, back pain, of course, Bell's palsy, bipolar disorder, of course, cancer. Anytime anyone has cancer, there was always an emotional component. There's an emotional component to every disease process that we've seen, and this list goes on. I mean, chest
Excellent.
pain, chronic fatigue, colitis, constipation, Crohn's disease, depression, diabetes, fibromyalgia, headaches, heartburn, or gastroesophageal reflux, hip pain, hypoglycemia, immunity issues, impotency, infertility, insomnia, irritable bowel syndrome, joint pain, knee pain, learning disabilities, low back pain, low self-esteem, lupus, migraines, neck pain, nerve pain, night terrors, nightmares, um, migraines, multiple sclerosis, neck pain, nerve pain, night terrors. Wait, oh, that's those
I
got
see.
rid. Yeah.
That's
Paranoia,
quite. Hmm.
Parkinson's disease. Now, I had a patient that came into me,
The voice got broken. The last thing which you said, which disease? Parkinson's, did you say?
Parkinson's
Yeah.
disease.
Okay.
Yes. Um, now, I have not seen cases where that's, you know, been completely uh, eliminated. But I had a patient that came in, and by working on that patient, this patient was so bad
Mhm.
that they had this very slow shuffling gait, right? And it took this patient a couple of minutes just to walk down my hallway in my office because they were moving very slowly. And after working on that patient for a couple of weeks, it all went away. It didn't go away permanently, but it all went away. All the symptoms went away. In fact, he started taking his wife out dancing,
Yeah,
working in the
that's
yard.
incredible.
It was unbelievable. I couldn't believe it either. And then, so he had a window of about maybe 3 weeks or a month. But then it started coming back, and there wasn't anything I could do. But it was kind of like uh, he came back for a while, and his wife had him, his family had him back for a while, and then he started going downhill again, and then he died. But none of us live forever. But
That's right.
we have seen amazing shifts happen in patients with Alzheimer's, for example. I don't know if I mentioned that one.
I
Um,
had a few patients for Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, but not, see, before today, right, before right now that I'm speaking to you, it never occurred to me that, I can do something for them by using and utilizing the emotion of the body code. It is only, see, the question
yeah,
is so relevant because this gives me a window of thinking that, yes, these things also can be applied. And
yeah,
at least we can alleviate their suffering and their pain, even if we are not able to rectify the disease fully.
yeah, sure. I mean, it's interesting because sometimes I would get a call to go and work on someone who was in hospice care, who was comatose,
Yeah.
or somebody that was kind of just lingering, sometimes for months and months and months. And of course, the family would hope that the person was going to recover and get well. But these are typically very old people. And
Yes.
usually, what would happen when I would go in and I would work on these people and release their trapped emotions, apparently the trapped emotions that were released were the ones that were kind of holding them back, because usually these people would pass on peacefully within 48 hours or so.
Right.
So, kind of interesting.
So their
Uh,
path becomes easy. Their future progressive path, evolution of the soul, or the path of the soul becomes easy.
Becomes easier, yeah, because a lot of the time people have fears about moving on to the next, the next life. People, have regrets. They have all kinds of things, lots of emotional baggage, and so
And
moving.
this is again an aspect which you have never mentioned in the emotion code. So probably in the revised version, the fear of dying or passing away peacefully is one of the very important aspects. Now, this is missing. So, probably in the next edition, we'll be able to hear your experiences on this particular aspect as well. But this is very important because every one of us has to die. Maybe I never suffer from a cold, but eventually I have to die. And whenever somebody dies, there are certain bad experiences which people carry on even to their next lives, according to our mythological scriptures. So if
Absolutely right.
you can lighten, if the emotion code can lighten our load to
Yeah.
our spiritual journey, that is another very important aspect, I guess, which you have brought up.
Well, it really is. Dying is as important as being born. And ideally, you want to leave this world, if you can, free of all your baggage, so that when you move through that door, you're floating through like a butterfly instead of like you know I don't know.
Interestingly, if you would permit me, I would like to say something on it regarding our religious beliefs and religious scriptures. So we believe in Hinduism, there is a scripture called the Bhagavad Gita. In the
Mhm.
Bhagavad Gita, there's a chapter, chapter number 8, which talks about death and then reincarnation. And it is mentioned over there that whatever a person thinks when he's dying, he or she's dying, is the exact thing which he'll carry forward to the next life, and he or she will experience those particular aspects which he had thought about when he or she was dying. So it is very important uh, to deal with our emotions and our mental thought forms when we are dying, what to think and what not to think. And therefore, even in the Jain religion, there's a book called The Art of Dying. Again, there is the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Again, there is the Egyptian Book of the Dead. So a lot of cultures have put a lot of emphasis on the whole process because eventually every one of us has to pass over. And I think the body code and just like you are writing a new book, the heart code regarding the heart wall, so that we can experience life 100%. Similarly, we
Right.
can experience death 100%. If you can write something on it, it will be great for readers like us to read and gain from your immense wisdom. Please.
I'll uh, I'll make a note of that and write an article about that. That is really it really is an important point.
Yeah,
Um, well, there are some more things on the list.
please,
You know,
please.
let's see, PTSD, of course,
Yes.
self-sabotage, sexual dysfunction, shoulder pain, sinus problems, social anxiety, suicidal thoughts, of course, tennis elbow, um, thyroid problems, vertigo, weight issues. The thing about it is, I'm often asked by people, can the emotion code help blank? I mean, fill in the blank with anything you can think of. And the answer is it might. And the reason why is because a trapped emotion is literally a ball of energy, okay? From about the size of a baseball to maybe the size of a small melon, okay? So if you can imagine having several hundred of these in your body as an adult person, that's probably what's going on with you. And wherever one of these energies is lodged, um, it's affecting the part of the body that is in that sphere. So let's say, for example, you have a trapped emotion of anger and it's lodged in the area of your liver. Well, all the chemical reactions now taking place in the liver are going to be a little bit distorted. The blood flow may be a little bit distorted. The lymph flow, the flow of acupuncture meridian energy through that area will be a little bit off. And so, what might you start to experience? Well, you might start to experience allergies because the liver is it's the biggest piece of the immune system, right? And so, when the liver is stressed out and not functioning well, you might get allergies, you might be more prone to infection, and so on. Let's say that a trapped emotion lodges in your throat. Well, you might end up having thyroid trouble. One lodges in your neck, you might have neck pain. In your head, you might get headaches. Shoulder, you might get shoulder pain. If a trapped
Excellent.
emotion, right? If a trapped emotion lodges in your uterus or your sexual organs, you may not be able to have a child. And there were, it's funny because the last three women that I worked on when I was in practice for fertility. Now, these were women who I'm just thinking about the last three. I can't remember the other ones, but these last three women that I worked on had triplets. Um, these were women who had been going through in vitro fertilization, right?
Right.
And and a couple of them were pretty much out of money and could only do it one more time. And I remember one of these women. Her name was Nikki, and her mother had fibromyalgia, which is, of course, pain all over the body. I think that was maybe
Yes, yes,
one's
yes.
on the list.
Hmm.
And I helped her to, get rid of her fibromyalgia with the emotion code and the body code. And then she said, I think I want to have my daughter come see you because she's trying to have a child, she and her husband, but they're kind of at the end of their rope now. So her daughter came in, Nikki, beautiful young woman, and she said that they'd been trying to conceive for 4 years, doing in vitro fertilization, and nothing was working. And so I started working with her, released some trapped emotions, did a couple of other things in the body code, and boy, within about a month or so, boom, she called up. She was pregnant. No in vitro, totally natural, right? Well,
Incredible.
so a few
Incredible.
months after that, her mother calls me up and she said, "Do you know what's happening with my daughter Nikki?" And I said, "No, is everything okay?" She said, "Yes, everything is okay." She said, "But she's having triplets." And I wasn't sure if I should, apologize or well, it wasn't my fault. They had to sell their house and get a big van, and so they got all their kids in one shot. And then that happened actually with my niece Julia. She had three. One didn't make it, but she ended up having two, and I think they're about 10 now. But anyway, yeah, you never know. I have seen things get well that I would never have imagined could get well or would get well, right? I remember once I had a patient that had not had any bladder control for 10 years. And
Cause
in
of
in
incontinence.
one session, her bladder control came back.
Wow.
One session. And I mean, I wasn't even specifically working on that.
Have you
I
ever
was,
worked, Dr. Nelson, on stones, kidney stones or gallbladder stones?
yes, many times. In
Does
fact,
this help?
yeah. Well, I'll tell you what I used to use for those. I'll give you the recipe. Okay.
Please, please. I'm
Um,
because nowadays I'm having some patients from Congo who have some kidney issues and bladder issues. And initially, when these clients come, and if they're meeting you for the first time, they don't just open up. They'll come and they'll say, "Doctor, I am having a problem in the back. The doctor has advised me surgery. I don't want to go in for a surgery." And once
yeah.
I did that, okay, then he says, there is another problem which I want to tell you. I said, okay, tell me. He says, oh, my kidneys have failed. So doctors have advised me for a transplant. I said, why didn't you tell me in the first place? When I start to work on the kidneys, I said, okay, let me try. What is the creatinine level? He said 2.61. I said, okay, let me try. How much time has elapsed? He says, say about 8 to 9 months have elapsed since I got my check done. I said, all right, let me move further. So the second sitting, I'm working on the kidneys. He tells me there's a stone in the bladder and there is so much of problem while passing the urine. I said, okay, why don't you tell me together? And then he's like, there is one more thing, but I would like to tell you in private because that is a very private thing. I said, this is everything is private. Your kidneys are as private as they can be. And now he says, like, there's a problem with the sexual organ because unless I put in an injection, I can't be intimate anymore. So I said, all right, give me a break, bring out a list of things which you are suffering from so that at least I can think from the energetic point of view of what the intervention should be rather than giving to me all these things in installments. It doesn't make
Right.
sense. You end up paying more. I end up putting in a lot more effort than I should be putting in. But then I was
Yeah.
not very sure about the stone issues. I'm working through acupuncture on the stone issues. So I wanted for my sake, and of course, for those people who are healers and might be having patients who are having stones, and whether body code or emotion code can do something, or in your experience, um,
Well,
what has it been?
yes. I mean, during the 20 roughly 20 years that I was in practice, I saw a lot of people with kidney stones
I see that
and gallstones too. Now,
gives me a lot of hope.
yes, and so here's the trick. Okay.
Please, please.
Now, yes, you want to use the emotion code, clear whatever emotional energies you can that are trapped in those organs, right?
Hmm.
But then you can dissolve most kidney stones. It doesn't always work, but it's
Yeah,
worked. I think it's worked every time that I've tried it. And I can't remember where I learned this from. I didn't come up with it myself. I learned it from another doctor, but a very old doctor who now has passed on for many years now. But okay, so for kidney stones, you use two things.
please.
Classic Coca-Cola is one, and the other thing is a pureed asparagus. So what I would have my patients do is I'd have them buy a 6 pack of classic Coca-Cola. Now this is the kind with regular sugar in it, not
Right.
aspartame or some kind of artificial sweetener. Yes, it's a lot of sugar, but Coca-Cola is very acidic. And so what I would tell them is in the space of 1 hour, I want you to drink this, drink as much of the Coca-Cola as you can. Buy a 6 pack. If you can drink the whole thing, great. At the end of that hour, I want you to eat about a half of a cup of pureed asparagus. And there's some kind of there's a chemical reaction that takes place, like, apparently between the oxalic acid in the asparagus and the acid in the Coke, very acidic. And I remember we had a patient once that had a kidney stone that looked like deer antler. Okay,
Oh.
one of the kidneys,
Hmm.
and they were going to have it, lithotripsy the next day, and gave them this recipe. They went home and did it. The next day they went in and they took an X-ray, to make sure what was going on, and it was gone. And they came to the patient. They said, "Wait, it's not there anymore. That must have been unbelievably painful. What happened?" And so he told them, what he had done with the Coke and asparagus, and they just couldn't believe it. And so, dis-
Excellent. That is a nice food for thought. And I will definitely apply on 2, 3 cases if they agree. And I will also give you the feedback of what happened when we
Yeah,
did.
let me know how it goes.
Yes, important.
It always worked for me.
Excellent.
Um,
I'm
it's
so
kind of
grateful that
awful.
you shared that with me.
Sure. Now there's as far as gallstones too. What we used to do is in when I was in practice, what we used to do is we would give people. Let's see, we would have people. let me think. What was it? Mm, hold on a second.
Please.
I might need to just refresh my memory here because it's been a while. Okay, here we go. Let's see. That's not quite, that's the one I need. Nope, that's not it either. Hold on. Let's see, hold on. Um, I might have to get back to you on this one. I'm looking, not
Mhm.
quite finding what I was looking for on this one. Um,
But if you do get hold of that information, please do share with me. It will be of immense help to my patients. And also, in case we share that in our next conversation, then to people around
yeah,
the world.
yeah. Essentially, it has to do with um, you drink apple juice as fresh as you can get it um, every day for about 5 days, and you drink like 2 glasses of it a day. Okay, so two 8 ounce 8 ounce glasses. Then what you do is you take about a half a cup of olive oil, okay, that's warmed, okay, and you blend that with about a half a cup of lemon juice, and uh, and then
So
go to
does it?
bed. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard about this detox, this olive oil one, but it does work in your experience.
Yes. In fact, I remember once a patient gave me a model gallbladder. It was a rubber gallbladder about this big on a plaque because we had saved her gallbladder because she
I
passed.
see.
In fact, I used to have patients bring me in stones sometimes that they would, extricate out from the toilet. And I
In
remember
20,
a
in
patient,
20,
what's that?
no, no, no. I was just sharing that in 2021, one of my followers in Preston, UK,
Uh,
she shared with me this particular technique and she used it on herself. So she first asked for permission that can I send you some photographs? These are little, they're not very pleasing to the eye. I said, no problem, please send. So then she said, these are all my stones which have come out. And then I was
Absolutely.
amazed, but then I never tried that up because I never got that information from somebody who's into practice. So this was a patient sharing. So definitely I took that into consideration, but I did not recommend further because I needed the same information coming from a source of much more reliability. So that is why I was
Yeah.
waiting for that. But
So
thanks for
yeah,
sharing.
yeah, that's basically it. And I used that for many years, and that also helped amazingly. And I remember once a patient came in and they brought in a big jar, and they had all of their stones. I mean, there were like 100 stones, all sorted by size, and there were 6 or 8 that were about the size of 3 garbanzo beans each, all kind of smashed together. And then some were just the size of a single garbanzo bean, and then there were smaller ones. But I mean, yeah, it's amazing how well it works. But I would, recommend, you know, uh, uh, definitely drinking the apple juice first. And, it's
Right.
something, I mean, anytime you're doing something like this one, it's a good idea to, maybe not be, maybe do it under doctor supervision, or,
Yes,
have somebody that you're working with. Yeah, it's a good idea.
absolutely. I agree. So moving on to the future of the body code and emotion code, I'll give you what I did and I'll take your perspective on it.
Okay.
So a few years ago, maybe I think about two and a half, there were real life problems. And one of my followers from New Zealand, Auckland, she's also a psychologist. She calls and says that, now I have the license, I have everything here. I want to go in and move into a bigger house. So the house which she was trying to move in was quite big than the one she was living in. And she said, we have the same landlord, but the landlord perhaps is not willing to give that house to me. Can you do something to make sure that the landlord gives me that particular house for rent. It was a bona fide intention. There was nothing malafide in it. I said, okay.
Sure.
I said, although I have never tried, but think, if you are calling me for this, because this is not a health problem, and she used to come to me for other things as well, like astrology and all back when she was in India. So I said, okay, let me try. And so what I did was I took the landlord, A, B, her, and C, the house. And then I tried to figure out using my pendulum or kinesiology, what can be done. And then I figured out, like, this girl already wants it. Is the energy system compatible? Yes, the energy system is compatible. All right. Is the landlord and her energy system compatible? Yes, that is also compatible. Now, what can I do? I kept on thinking. After a while, I said, is all the three components compatible? It said no. So that means the landlord, this girl, and the house. Are the three compatible? It said no. I said, now let us see, because the person who has to give the house is the landlord. So I concentrated on the landlord. What are the emotions? Are there some emotional problems which are not letting the landlord let the house to her? It said yes. I said, okay. So I opened the emotion code chart. I said, let me find out what the emotions are. So those emotions were like something, and then I opened my belief systems chart, which exactly is not, I don't know what is there in the belief code. I don't have an access to that information because that is not in public domain. You have still not come out with it. But then uh, I used my whatever knowledge I have of beliefs, and I figured
Huh?
out that there were some beliefs. He used to think that probably it doesn't have what it takes to live in that kind of a house and to be paying that amount of rent, etc. And I cleared them off. And the next morning, she had a meeting about 10 a.m. New Zealand time with the guy. And then the guy confessed because I shared my report with her, whatever I found out in the beliefs and in the emotions which were troubling the landlord and preventing him from giving the house to her. And I gave that report. And the next morning, in the conversation between that psychologist and the landlord said that, yesterday night, I was thinking of not giving this house to you on rent because of these particular things. But I don't know. You seem to be a pretty lady to me, and I don't know why, but it's okay. You go ahead with it, but do make sure that I receive my rent in time. And then when she calls me up and when she tells me about this episode which happened, I am so ecstatic. I said, okay, this is kind of a reality shift which was made possible. So I'll try it again. So the same lady, because I don't advertise. And if you don't advertise and you don't know actually what you can and what you can't do, you can only work with people who already trust you and they expect your help in certain situations which they are facing. So now the next situation was she wanted to sublet a portion of the same house in order that she gets the rent to pay to
Mhm.
the landlord. So she's trying to sublet to a person, but that particular person wants to come and stay with her, with his family. But the problem is that his landlord won't let him free of the existing tenancy agreement. So she calls me up and she says, can you do something about it? And I said, please don't call me for these things. I am into healing of the mind and the body and the reading of future. And this is something which is absolutely alien for me. But she says, since you tried it the last time and it worked, won't you even try this time? I said, okay, I'm trying, but my reputation should not be at stake because if I fail, I never proclaimed that I never proclaimed that I was a master at it. But
Right.
being a curious fellow that I am, I tried to do it. I cleared off the emotions from the landlord, which were like he believed that once you have entered into an agreement with me for a year, then you should not leave my house. Fairness, the belief of fairness and something like that. So I tried to release those kind of fears, allay those fears, and in a couple of days' time, the landlord released this particular tenant from the tenancy agreement, and he could come and my follower psychologist could sublet the house. So I termed this now as a reality shift, which I was able to do. I don't know how much is this fruitful or
Mhm.
beneficial, or how much of it does work in each and every scenario. But yes, I do understand that in every problem which we face, there is kind of a flexibility always inherent in every problem which we face. And if there is a flexibility, then this kind of a reality code or a reality shift code might help, as it did help to my people back
Yeah.
here. So this is something which I wanted to share with you, um,
Yeah.
because had it not been the emotion code and the body code which I went through, then probably I would not even have thought about things like these, because this would come technically otherwise under the term magic. Those people who are doing the spells and those kind of things which we are not into.
No, exactly right. Well, the great science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke said that any sufficiently advanced technology will be indistinguishable from magic. And so, nope, this is not magic, but it just is simply about quantum physics. So, I have my own story just recently about this same kind of thing where a very good friend of ours was trying to sell a house that they owned. And so they own two houses now. And the first house that they owned, they wanted to sell, and it was sitting vacant for probably a year. And it just hadn't been selling and hadn't been selling. And so what I did is we talked a little bit about what had happened in the house and the couple that lived in the house before really they really loved the house. It was their dream home. But then not long after the house was finished, the wife became ill and then she died. And
Oh,
so what we found when we tested, and this, I mean, we were just trying to figure out if there was anything we could do because it seemed strange that the house hadn't sold for the price that it was selling for. It was a very good price in a great area, in a very hot market. It didn't make any sense. And so what we found was there was an energy of grief. His grief had been absorbed essentially and was still there. So when people would walk into the house, on a subconscious level, they would feel that emotion of grief, and then they just wouldn't want to buy the house because the house sold the very next day after that.
excellent.
After
These are the
clearing that.
kind of experiences me and my viewers would like to listen from you more in the times to come. Dr. Bradley Nelson, I thank you very much for joining me today and giving me this opportunity to have an interaction with you. And it has been such a delightful experience. And I think the viewers who would be watching this video in the times to come will benefit so much from your perspectives on the world of energy healing, on its application in other fields other than health, and especially in some of the diseases where it is difficult to cause relief to the patients. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's been really a lot of fun to talk. We'll have to do it again sometime.
Thank you.
Thanks.